Machiavelli wrote The Prince in 1513 during one of the lowest points of his life. For 15 years, he had worked as a diplomat for the Florentine Republic, but everything changed when the powerful Medici family returned to power and overthrew the government. Machiavelli lost his job, was thrown in prison, and finally sent into exile on a small farm. It was from this position of disgrace and poverty that he wrote his most famous work. Unlike his other book, The Discourses on Livy, which supports republican government, The Prince is short, direct, and shocking. Machiavelli did not write for philosophers or academics. He wrote for a busy ruler who needed practical, no nonsense advice on how to gain power, keep it, and expand it. Machiavelli begins by throwing out the old ways of thinking about government. Earlier, thinkers like Plato and Aristotle classified states based on their moral goals or their constitutions. Machiavelli does something completely different. He classifies states simply by how they are acquired. For him, the word acquisition is key. It is an economic idea applied to politics. This shows that power, not morality, is the real foundation of politics. He divides all states into two main types, hereditary and new. Hereditary principalities are easy to rule because the people are used to the ruling family. New principalities are much harder. When a ruler adds new territory to his existing state, he faces huge challenges. He must always be watchful, set up colonies, and carefully manage other powerful neighbors. Machiavelli introduces the idea of the new prince, someone who rises to power from nothing. This can happen through his own skill and strength, which Machiavelli calls virtue, or through pure luck or help from others, which he calls fortuna. The perfect example of a new prince is Cesare Borgia. Borgia used cruelty, deception, and quick action to bring peace to a violent region. He even had a brutal official killed in public to show the people he was on their side, while also getting rid of someone who had become too powerful. For Machiavelli, good laws and good soldiers go together, but soldiers always come first. A prince cannot have good laws without a strong army to enforce them. In several chapters, Machiavelli attacks mercenary soldiers, hired fighters who fight only for money. They are unreliable and undisciplined, cowardly in a real crisis. He also attacks auxiliary troops, soldiers borrowed from a friendly power. These are just as dangerous because the ruler becomes dependent on someone else's strength. A wise prince must build his own army of citizens. He must also make war his main focus. Even in peacetime, he must train his body, study history, and learn from past military campaigns so he is ready for any conflict. The most important part of the prince comes in chapter 15. Here, Machiavelli makes his famous break with traditional philosophy. He says he will not write about imaginary republics that have never existed. Instead, he will go straight to the effectual truth, that is, the reality of how people actually behave. The gap between how people live and how they should live is so large that a ruler who tries to be good all the time will be destroyed by all the people who are not good. Therefore, a prince must learn to be bad when he needs to be. He should use this ability only when necessary, but he must have it. Machiavelli redefines several traditional virtues to fit this harsh reality. On generosity, he argues that a prince who tries to be truly generous will have to tax his people heavily, which will make him hated. It is wiser to accept a reputation for being stingy. This may bring some bad press, but it will not make people hate him enough to rebel. On cruelty and mercy, Machiavelli asked the famous question: is it better to be loved or feared? Ideally, a ruler would be both, but since that is rare, it is much safer to be feared. People are fickle and ungrateful. Love is held by a chain of obligation that people break whenever it suits them. But fear is held by the dread of punishment, which never fails. However, the prince must avoid being hated because hatred leads to conspiracies. On keeping promises, he says, a wise ruler cannot always keep his word when it harms his interest. He must be like both a fox and a lion. The fox to see traps, the lion to scare off wolves. He must be a master of both deceit and strength. To stay safe, a prince must avoid being despised or hated. He should never remain neutral in a conflict between two powerful neighbors because the winner will see him as an enemy and the loser will resent him for not helping. He must also guard against flatterers. The only way to do this is to create an environment where wise advisors feel safe to speak the truth, but only when the prince asks for their advice. After listening, the prince must make his own decision and stick to it. In chapter 25, Machiavelli turns to the subject of fortune or luck. He describes fortune as a violent river that floods the land and destroys everything in its path. However, he insists that humans are not powerless. By building dams and dikes during peaceful times, people can prepare for the flood and limit its damage. In the same way, a prince can prepare for bad luck by being strong and making smart decisions in good times. Machiavelli then makes a famously controversial comparison. He says fortune is like a woman who must be beaten and handled roughly to be controlled. This is a sign of his time and is frankly offensive today. But his point is that bold, aggressive action is more effective than caution. Fortune favors the young and the daring. Machiavelli ends the prince with an emotional appeal. He calls for a new Italian leader to free the country from foreign invaders. Italy was divided and weak, and he saw it as a perfect opportunity for a prince with great virtue to step in, use harsh necessity as his guide, and restore the nation's glory. This ending shows that Machiavelli was not a cold monster. He genuinely wanted to see his homeland united and strong, even if the path to get there required ruthless methods. The Prince is a book that forces us to rethink about uncomfortable questions. Is it ever acceptable for a leader to lie, cheat, or kill for the good of the state? Should political success be judged by results or by the methods used to achieve them? Machiavelli does not offer easy answers. He presents a raw, unvarnished view of how power really works. Some read the book as a guide for tyrants, others see it as a satire that exposes the corruption of rulers. Still others call it the first work of modern political science. Whatever interpretation you choose, The Prince remains a powerful and disturbing text. It challenges every generation to look honestly at the gap between our moral ideas and the harsh realities of political survival.